Show, presented by Orbitz. Joining us today is Dominique Wilkins.
The human highlight film. He's a Hall of Famer and one of the most exciting dunkers the NBA has ever seen. Let's talk to Neek. Of all the posters that were made with Dominique Wilkins dunking on someone, Dominique Wilkins' favorite was?
I think my favorite poster was a poster that came out by the Costakos brothers called 21 Dunk Street. And I wasn't dunking, I was in this funky leather coat with some tight jeans on that I would never wear again. But at that time, it was pretty hot.
And so you look back on it and it's okay because it was sexy at the time.
It was sexy at the time, and now my kids see it like, Dad, what were you thinking?
Do you have any of those posters?
I do. I do.
Where?
Well, you know, my wife won't let me put them up on the wall because they're so dated, but they're in my man cave.
What was the time that basketball left you emotionally broken? The most hurt you've ever been by basketball?
I think the most hurt I ever been by basketball, probably twice. It was probably when I got traded from Atlanta, which, you know, I thought I would never leave Atlanta. Thought I would retire there as a player. I think that really hurt a lot, you know, and it took me a long time to get over that.
So explain to me what it was like being traded from Atlanta.
It was like going from heaven to hell. You know, going from the penthouse to the outhouse, so to speak. You know, going to the LA Clippers was just something that was dreadful for me. You know, nothing against the organization, of course, but that was just a dreadful time for me.
How'd you find out?
Well, the management called me. Actually, what had me back up, Lenny Wilkins said to me that, you know, the day before that, you know, I'm the franchise guy. I got to get these guys ready for the playoffs and, you know, get ready for this run. And next day, I get a call and said they traded me. So that's how I found out, yeah.
So one day to the next.
Right.
So you were floored. You pick up the phone and they tell you in person? How does that happen?
I was floored. And, you know, I remember that same day, one of our owners now, and Mike Guerin Sr., came to my home and when I got traded, and when he came to the door, he couldn't speak, could not say a word. He was so emotional. I mean, he was bawling, crying. That's how much he cared about me, forget about a player, as a person, and being like a son to him. I mean, and he was like a father to me. And so when he came to my home, I mean, I didn't know how to react. So that was a very emotional moment for me, to see someone outside of just basketball, how he felt about me as a person.
I imagine you cried too, right?
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
Oh, it was hard for you. It was hard for you to admit that.
But, you know, and saying all that, I never saw myself playing anywhere else but Atlanta. I mean, I love Atlanta. I love the team. I love the city, our ownership. I mean, it's just who I am.
When would you say that Dominique Wilkins became a man?
You know, I think I became a man, believe it or not, when I turned 16. Because I've been on my own since I was 16. I left home when I was 16 to fulfill a dream. And again, it's nothing I'm ashamed of. I look back on, I'm very proud of what I've accomplished.
Well, what happened? You left home at 16?
Well, I grew up with 8 brothers and sisters, one parent. And the only way I felt like I could help myself, help my family, is for me to leave. And I went to North Carolina, and that's where a high school coach discovered me on the playground.
How hard was that to leave home? You know, you've got all these siblings. How hard was that?
It was very hard. It was very hard, but it was something that I felt I had to do at that time.
What was your life like right before that, Dominique? What was your childhood like?
I had a good childhood life when my father was there. My father got divorced at a very early age when I was a very young man. But and then it got hard. Life was hard. You know, growing up in the projects, the 8 brothers and sisters, you know, some days you didn't have anything to eat. You know, it was tough for a single parent to raise 8 kids, so I had to become a man at a very early age. My sister had to become a woman at a very early age, so it was our responsibility to help my mother. And that's how I lived my life, you know, helping others.
What was your plan? You're 16 years old, you leave the house. Do you say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, I did. And all my family now, most of my family lived in North Carolina as far as my siblings, outside of my immediate family. But again, I wasn't connected to them that way. So my high school coach kind of took me in. Then I ended up moving with my grandmother on my dad's side of the family. And then that's where my career took off.
What's a time that you remember impacted you from childhood, Dominique, where you looked around and said, we don't have anything. This makes me hungry because literally and metaphorically, we don't have anything.
Well, I tell you, when I first felt that way is when my brother and I walked 3 miles in the heat, in the summertime, to some of our family's home, and they told me that we had to sit on the porch, that we couldn't come in the house. I remember this like it was yesterday, and I remember my brother who was younger was crying because it was hot. We hadn't had anything to eat, and I remember telling him, he said, "Look, stop crying." I said, "We're gonna walk back home, and I'm gonna take care of you, and we'll never have to ask anybody else for a thing again after this day." And I held true to that. I stuck to that, and I never have since then.
Wow. Why weren't you allowed in the house?
For whatever reason at the time, people can be a little selfish, and we would look kind of like the black sheets of the family then.
Wow. So that feeling, that's poignant. That's powerful. So that feeling stayed with you. You distinctly remember telling him, "We're never going to ask. We're never going to need from somebody else again."
Yeah. I said that to him, I can remember like it was yesterday. And I worked my butt off from that day forward to be successful at something.
You've mentioned that you don't do much in the way of regret, but if I hit rewind and made you go do something over in your life, what would you do over?
I think the only thing I would do over is tell my dad I loved him more before he passed. I think that's the only thing. I don't think even though my dad and I were very close and I loved him, I don't think I said it enough. And I think that's my only regret.
What was your relationship like with him?
Very close. We were like brothers, more so than dad and son. But sometimes you tend to take it for granted, from a dad standpoint. So when I see other people with their dads, that's the only time it really hits me.
Dominique, thank you for being on with us. That was really enjoyable.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you guys.